talking about people who inspire me. The panel consists of people with whom, whose personal relation I cherish, and I learn a lot from them, and I hope to learn more today together with you. And I'm going to ask them on the stage. I think this will work, probably. Yes. First of all, Digital Skills Director at Exin. Exin, who certify professionals, including people who govern AI. So if you are teaching and certifying people who govern AI, you understand AI. She's a thought leader. She travels around the world to share her learnings, and I'm very glad to have her today. Suzanne Galletly. Have a seat. This is no psychological test. Just pick any. Next, he's the director security of Dutch Railways, Nederlandse Spoorwegen, with his award-winning team, I might say, and very glad to have him because Nederlandse Spoorwegen has been doing AI forever, so they are a leader in that sense, and I'm very interested in how they are governing AI and how Dimitri is trailblazing that. So please welcome Dimitri van Zantvliet. And the last celebrity we have here, the Global Data Protection Officer of Randstad. Randstad, the biggest HR company in the world, putting millions of people every year to work, working with personal data, with decisions that influence people's lives, so highly regulated, and they've been doing it for ages as well. So also a leader in AI. I'd like to welcome Wouter-Bas from Vegt. Or WB, how he's called in international settings.
We inspired them, I think.
Gonna wait a couple of seconds.
Come join us.
Anything you can do.
I want to start with you, Dimitri. Nederlandse Spoorwegen. What can you tell us about typical AI applications in your organization and also new ideas with the idea to inspire us and let us know a bit more about what AI does well, where AI excels in your context?
Well, if you talk about innovation, and that's what you do on stage ever since this seminar started, railway started 200 years ago. So it started in England in 1825. And I think we started 1839, so that's a little bit behind the UK. And over time you saw waves of innovation. So the first one was like mechanical, so levering the tracks with the big levers by hand. Then came electromechanical, then came electronics and the chips, and eventually we went to data. I think we're now at 1990, 95 something. We were collecting, harvesting data. And data was the new gold, actually. We now think data is the new uranium because, it's very powerful, but you need to curate it and dispose of it if it's necessary. And now we are in the age of AI. And if you look at the development of AI is a very broad thing, of course. And we started with an expert system that was seen as AI, the first AI system in 1986. And this was built to enable operators to calculate the price of movement of goods. The early days, everything was NS. Now it's passengers, but early days it was also goods. And was very difficult to calculate how to move iron ore, for example, or coal from A to B, and specifically when there was crossing borders. You needed very thick books. So that's when we started doing AI development, and over the years, many more applications came. So for example, for the maintenance of the trains, for the brakes, for the doors, We use predictive maintenance, so we can actually predict when it needs to be maintained, and that saves a lot of money, of course, but also getting trains out of the operation is very cumbersome, and it will lead to an effect on your daily commute for the passenger. We have AI if you want to find a seat. You want to know where to stand on the station and to find the seat so you can sit, which is very difficult sometimes at some trajectories. We have, I think we were the first in the world, in the railway world, that we now have AI on the trains, on the edge, was also an example. So we have a next-gen firewall in the first series of trains already working, operative, with intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, but also anomaly detection on the IT layers and on the OT layers. So this is totally, it's amazing. It's new. It's running since this year, and we are the first in the world. And now we are doing Gen AI, of course. Not quite sure if you want to touch on Gen AI already.
Well, if you have a nice illustrative example of how it makes a difference for your organization.
Yeah, I think we already have like 45 use cases running with Gen AI, and the most are running on our own contained environment. So we have, I think, 4 models that we are working with. We started with OpenAI, of course, 3 years already ago. And I think one of the first things we built next to the chatbot, of course, was the chatbot that could provide answers to the cybersecurity framework. So the policy house, we used RAG to look into all the policies. We put PDFs in a bucket. Now we do it in a SharePoint site as well. And you can ask them questions on the OpenAI model, and then we moved along with the new models, and we did some very heavy testing on the parameters that you can use for the models, like, for example, the temperature. So how much can it be creative, right? Yes. And the chunk size, and so I think 10 parameters. We scripted all that with Python, and we did all the testing to see if the outcomes were good enough to use it in operations.
Yeah.
And we found the right balance in the parameters to bring it live. So now you can ask all about cybersecurity policies, and that we did already 1.5 years ago. So that's running fully operational, and is also running now in a multi-model way, where the engineers, for example, can take pictures and ask for defects on the train in the engineering environment. Yeah, so there's a lot of, and also for example on a train, the conductor.
Conductor?
Yeah,
Yes.
conductor. So when you want to write a fine, you need to have the right legal notation, and you also need to collect some evidence. So now you can ask ChatNS. So I want to fine for someone smoking on the station. So you need to collect evidence that he or she is really smoking, and that you first gave a warning, and then but then the chatbot is now giving all the advice on how to collect the proper evidence, because we had, I think, before that around 60% that we could not collect the fine because the evidence was not stored properly. So that's we are collecting more evidence, and now
Amazing.
also the sanctions are working better.
Right.
So and yeah, it's the last example I can give is 1 week old, where we are using now. So our control framework is built in ServiceNow, and we are now using the ServiceNow API to look. So we have 330 development teams, like 1,800 people.
Is that for security controls or?
Yeah, cybersecurity controls.
Right.
And they are the product owner needs to attest the control, needs to bring the evidence in ServiceNow, and for that specific control, AI is now looking into the evidence and looking into the matching of the control with the evidence. And we are having great results where product owner gets advice that, for example, when you need to have a control about business continuity, that the chatbot now says your RPO or RTO is not in sync with the policy.
Right.
So, and then he can redo the work, and it saves a lot of work for the control engineers in my team, but also for the product owner themselves. So these are just a few examples what you see. Yeah, and it's I think all about, as Katelijne said, trying, breaking, and doing, and having fun with it. Also in the weekend we were testing all the models, because we just had so much fun with the engineering part as well.
Right, and you're building all these great applications, and I think they're very inspiring and tangible, but they need to comply with certain rules, which brings me to you, Suzanne. So what are the ethical principles that are important to have in mind and to apply on these new ideas as they sort of occur within an organization? And how can you stop the wrong ideas in their tracks and make people, give them the right mindset to apply these ethical points of views?
So if we start with the principles, obviously there's different ways of looking at this, but I really like the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI as a source of reference. In the first instance, I think it's an amazing exercise in value alignment. You know, if we talk about how difficult it is just to get one consensus on what fairness means in one geography or another, 193 for member states of the United Nations coming together and agreeing, getting some kind of value consensus on a thorny issue as the ethics of AI, I think is pretty impressive in itself. The recommendation, you know, talks about 10 different principles relating to the ethics of AI. I won't mention them all, but I'll pull out a few that I think are particularly important. One of them is right to privacy. Obviously, it talks about privacy are never far away when we're talking about AI, because of the reliance on data, and quite often that can be confidential or even sensitive or personal. But also, we've talked about it quite a lot today. Thank you, because Katelijne, you really helped me to head a few things into the goal. Fairness and non-discrimination is one of them. And just a very personal anecdote, I like to sometimes ask ChatGPT things or DALL-E just to sort of see what comes out of it. So I asked DALL-E to draw a leader for me. And then I asked it to draw, again, please, another leader. And I did that a few times, and I got, of course, lots of white males, no offence or no judgment.
None taken.
And I think after the 8th picture, I got the first black guy, and I gave up waiting for a woman. So, and people often say to me, but yeah, isn't that just our own human biases? Of course it's our own human biases. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be in the AI system. But AI has this amplification effect of then, you know, not only do we have these biases, but we're amplifying and reinforcing them via the AI systems. So that's another one that I'd like to point out. Sustainability is one, and there you get this kind of weird irony, I think, with AI, because I think the possibilities within AI to solve certain sustainability problems is huge. But at the same time, AI is, of course, using up lots of resources as well. So we've got this kind of weird irony. Transparency and explainability is there, but also human oversight. You mentioned it as well. And I'll come back to that a little bit later as well. But that's just some of the main principles outlined by the UNESCO recommendation that I think are most relevant, let's say.
Do any examples come to mind that are very illustrative of breaching those principles? Yeah, certainly. And unfortunately, we know there's a lot. And don't get me wrong, I love AI and the possibilities of it, but we do see that it can sometimes go wrong and very wrong. I think I'd like to pull out a few examples. One is there was a guy towards the end of last year that was actually awarded around $300,000 of compensation because he'd been arrested purely on the basis of facial recognition technology.
purely on the basis of that. And, you know, he was completely innocent, but he was arrested in his home and held in custody. And unfortunately, it's not an isolated incident because there are more cases of this occurring. And apart from the fact that he got compensation because it was a very traumatic experience, it actually completely changed the way that the Detroit police use facial recognition technology, which is the good thing. You can say, okay, couldn't you have done that first? But you know, better late than never. Now it's never just based on facial recognition technology that action is taken like an arrest. A second one I'd like to pull out, and again, Catalin, you were talking also about fairness in recruiting processes. I think some of us may already be familiar with the example of the recruitment algorithm used by Amazon. And, you know, to be fair to Amazon, as soon as they realized that it was being discriminatory, they withdrew it. And I'm sure there's other examples of companies using these kinds of algorithms. We don't know how unbiased they are. But for those of you not familiar with it, basically they were using an algorithm for recruitment purposes, and it turned out to be discriminatory towards females. And, you know, it's not crazy because it's based on past data and, you know, reflecting the dominance of males in the industry. The data was pointing towards successful candidates in the past were male, and that's how that's sort of occurred. But a third example I'd like to give that I think is even more, I don't give it lightly, this example, but there's actually a guy in Belgium that committed suicide after some very intensive conversations with a chatbot.
Yeah. Fell in love, right?
Sorry?
He fell in love.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a very intensive relationship that made it difficult for him. You know, the lines became blurred. But he was basically, he had a lot of concerns around the environment and sustainability, climate change problems. And he had this very intensive conversations with the chatbot around, you know, how to solve that problem. He felt like AI could be a really good way of solving those problems. And at a certain moment, you know, he said, maybe I should sacrifice my own life for the good of the environment. And the chatbot actually reinforced and suggested that could actually be a really good idea. And he actually did it. And again, I don't use I don't use it lightly because, you know, that's lives, some lives ruined somewhere. But it's just to show and to illustrate how wrong it can go if there's no human oversight.
Thank you. What I find illustrative about this example as well is that the fact that this chatbot was basically AI Act compliant, right? Because the provider of the chatbot said, this is a chatbot, be careful, but still it wasn't enough to...
Yeah, it was transparent that it was a chatbot, but for him those lines were blurred somehow. And
I'd like to go to you, Wouter-Bas, regarding responsible AI. How does Randstad make sure that all your initiatives are responsible? What's your secret?
Yes, secret. Building on what you were saying, we start with the principles. So I think you need to have something. And it started already 60 years ago, or 65 years, when Frits Koolsmeeding started the company. He started creating our business principles, which are already quite focused on trust, on valuing different principles, different perspectives, serving people. And if you look at those principles, those are in the company, and we translated those in 2018, 2019 to AI principles, because we saw AI, of course AI before was already happening, but at that moment we were really looking at how can we actually leverage AI further. And also to make it more effective, what we didn't want to do is reinvent the wheel. So what we also did is we build on what we already did with GDPR, with what we did with our security function. We have kind of a process to vet initiatives and to understand, hey, is this privacy proof? Is it security proof? Should we not also check if it's compliant with our AI principles? Is it ethical? Do we have all those controls in place considering fairness? And what we did is actually build on top of that rather than trying to build something separate. And we combined all those things. We set up all kind of governance structures around it, have like an ethics board. We have AI ethics officers in the different departments and groups, and we do a lot of training. So it's a combination of all those kind of things.
Yes.
I think the one challenge, and great to hear from that, is how can we actually enable AI to help us do it even better? Because there are options there. I think the other challenge in that context, maybe also moving already a bit on some follow-up questions you have, is it's going so super fast, so much faster now with Gen AI. So in the past it was like, hey, you could control it. People that understood AI was a small group, were data analysts, some programmers, some people that knew machine learning. And now it's actually everybody has access to it.
Yes.
And the challenge is, how do you keep control of that big group of people that all think they know it and they start using it? And how do you control that? Because I don't believe personally, if you block everything, people will go find another route.
So how have you organized this? I mean, you have these decentralized people that they can approach for ethical advice and doing sort of data protection impact assessment, but also I guess human rights impact assessments, what you've created.
Yeah.
I know that you've published your AI principles, something for everybody to check out. Search for Randstad and AI principles.
And they are public for everyone.
They'll find it. But how do you make it part of the process without being there as a sort of AI police?
So it's tone at the top, of course. So these principles, they need to be approved and valued by the leadership, and that's the first step, because if the leadership is not supporting it, sponsoring it, then forget about it. And then it comes into multiple things. So it's first of all education. I think it's super important. So we building a whole AI literacy. We started already an AI literacy program in the past with Gen AI. And that was really focused on the real technical people, help them to understand how do you do it rightly.
Yeah.
Now with AI becoming more available with Gen AI for everyone, when we saw it coming, we started, okay, how can we manage this? Let's start with some simple AI do's and don'ts. Think about what are use cases, where can we apply AI, where do we think logically start conversations with? So we had an online AI week with 400 people to talk about use cases, have industry leaders coming in, sharing their examples, have the conversations about, hey, what is the impact also on this from an ethical perspective?
Yes.
With 400 different business leaders, IT people, and based on that created also more awareness there. And then Gen AI do's and don'ts, use cases, flagging like, hey, this is green, this is orange, talk with somebody, and this is red, don't do it. That helps also giving people kind of guardrails. And what we are currently, so we are a Google company, so we don't have Copilot, we have Gemini as our friend. And we are now looking at how can we further work on making sure that Gemini is available. So Gemini is available for all users in the company. But how can we work on guardrails, so enabling those do's and don'ts also in the technology itself. So people are not willingly making mistakes, but it's so powerful that some people think, hey, oh, this is helpful. And they start trusting it. AI is so convincing, Gen AI, that people think, oh, this is such a good answer. And then the next time they don't check it, and the time after, etc. So
yeah.
Actually, there is no reinforced learning. And because we secured it, it will never learn from our data. So that's also not... So if you have people trusting it so much, how can you build in some guardrails to block certain use cases and give warnings to people and continuously make sure those people are going back, validating, oh, does it make sense?
You're talking automated guardrails.
Automated guardrails, because I think the guardrails on paper, all cool.
Yeah.
It starts there, but can you automate it? Can you help guiding people to do the things right? Yeah, and on the other side, and then also start, and I hate that we are having to do that, but looking at how can we block certain things. But that's how the world is, and that's what we did in the past with other technology as well. It's too easy to get all kind of technology and putting people at risk, our own people, the people we put to work. So let's help them to do the right thing and warn them about, hey, this is what you can use. And if you want to use this, go there, do this, go there, and use this for it. And that's still for some parts. We also don't use Gen AI for everything. We really look at traditional machine learning and traditional algorithms for like search and match. It's not explainable. You cannot Gen AI, and you need to understand what the model is doing. And still there, it's even already complex. So
Right.
really try to, and that's creating also conundrums, because if you want to check, I'm very curious how you did that, but let's have a conversation offline. You don't want to get all that personal data of people on all those attributes that are sensitive. But you need those attributes to actually test if the algorithm goes off.
Catch-22.
It's a catch-22 and also a security one, because the more sensitive personal data you get, the more likely people want to hack you and get that data.
Yeah.
So it's kind of how do you solve that? And I think it's a conversation to maybe have with the industry. Can we think about a way of having like sandboxes, maybe not have the companies having that data, but having like really testing entities that are being trusted with that sort of data? Because as a privacy officer, I don't want to have that data.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you can make up 1,000 rules, but you can't program people. So you need to learn them the principles by awareness and education, but you cannot trust on that, of course, because it's just too much. And sometimes people simply don't get it, independent of how much effort you put into this. So you want to build in additional guardrails, preferably in the technology. And well, Dimitri explained how you can do that with security controls. So it'll be very interesting how that evolves within Randstad. Going to you, Dimitri, I'm sure you can relate to what Wouter-Bas described. Can you add some best practices from within Dutch Railways, how you guys want to make 1,000 flowers bloom without frustrating them too much, so keeping things in check and making sure that it's responsible and innovative at the same time?
Yeah, I don't think we are a best practice yet. I think we are also pioneering our way through the AI landscape. It sounds like ChatGPT now. But I think when we started, we looked at some frameworks, and I think 4 years ago there was little. So I joined the working package from NIST RMF
Yes.
and joined the working group, and we wrote the NIST framework.
Great work.
Yeah, and then after a year, I thought it's not good enough, even the things that I contributed to. So then we looked at the EU framework that was designed, and it was also not good enough. The first one was lacking privacy, the other one was lacking some of the ethical parts, and now we are using a similar methodology, the ISO 42001, which is actually in the high-level structure similar to the ISO 27001.
Yeah.
Exactly, that we use for cybersecurity. So we are already used more or less in using that, and then we copied the methodology towards the rest of the organization. But then still it is very new, and we are also looking, because Dutch Railways, as I said, we've been riding trains for quite a long time. We have 10 safety domains, 10 security domains, like food safety, like railway safety, transport safety.
Of course.
So 10 safety domains, and we are also looking at how can you embed the AI and the cyber into the DNA of the organization in this similar fashion that we did with, for example, working security or labor security, and we try to copy a lot of the stuff that was already developed, and awareness trainings that we are reusing and rebuilding with an AI flavor on top of it. So yes, we need to do the AI literacy program. We set up a whole new program to implement the AI Act. So we did a scan for the forbidden algorithms. We are now into the high-risk algorithms. In the meantime, we are educating the company, even the board, to be aware of the risks and to manage the risks. But as I said, we are just pioneering, like many of us.
You are a big advocate of CISOs trying to work with AI, right? Because they have this sort of typical way of working, like a quality management system, which is just, almost the same with AI. And I agree with you, but I do regard you as a very innovative driven person, but I also know cybersecurity directors who are much more sort of directive and restrictive in their way of working. So I think if you lead AI in an organization, it's important that you have these the affinity with innovation, that you're very innovation oriented. So Suzanne, over to you. If you are finally AI compliant, are you then AI ethical? Is that case closed? Are you ready?
So it's interesting, isn't it, this relationship between ethics and compliance, and obviously legislation is sometimes an attempt to embed ethical values into laws and regulations. So there is a strong relationship, and the AI Act itself, for instance, is also very much referencing or embedding, if you like, the EU's guidelines on the ethics of AI, which is a different piece than the UNESCO piece, but they have a relationship. But the way I like to look at this is that, you know, it can be that you technically can do something, and even you legally may do something, but it's a different question if you morally should do something. And that's what ethics is about. And for me, that shows the difference between the two, because even if I legally may do something, I should still ask myself, should I morally do it?
Right.
And the thing I like about that is that it sort of puts the responsibility on us as users, because it's very easy to, you know, put the responsibility fully on the providers of AI systems or the policymakers, but we as users, you know, we all have a responsibility to define what is an acceptable use of AI. So I think that user responsibility is important, and we should always be asking ourselves, in all of the ways we interact with AI, should I morally do this? Is it acceptable from an ethical perspective?
How do you get that in the minds of everybody working with AI and creating ideas with AI? So Wouter-Bas talked about it, it's about awareness, but I've learned that I mean, there was one moment that I said, because I'm responsible for this in the organization, you should always be very careful with selecting people based on resumes. And the next day there was somebody, I haven't made a system and can select the resumes. I was like, no, I told you, but it doesn't work like that. You don't need to tell people, you need to sort of make them grasp this. So what's the trick? How do you create that mindset?
Not sure there's a trick, but it does all start with awareness, of course, and training can be an important part of that. Certification, because research has proven that if people are doing certification, they're more likely to take the learning seriously. But it goes much further than that, because what you don't want is that it's a one-off thing that's done, you know, tick in the box, we've done our AI literacy training and then we can all move on. So, you know, that could be setting up a community of practice. It's good to connect with peers to make sure that you can be exchanging information and best practices around AI and keeping up to date with the developments. And, you know, it's really about, because you want to embed it into culture and embed that mindset, it's really about how do you build human centricity design into everything that you do. So it should be in your processes, it should be in your products, it should be in the way that you think about things. And if you don't see it as a sort of tick in the box one-off exercise, but as something that you need to embed in the culture with communities of practice and all of these kinds of things, then you can start to really embed it, and then you're looking at an ethical mindset as opposed to, you know, just a compliance tick in the box.
Right.
A very difficult challenge is to embed it in your supply chain.
Yeah, definitely, and yet people will have to do that in the sense that, at least from a compliance perspective, because the scope of the AI Act being across the whole provider chain, you can't hide behind the fact that, well, it's not my system, it's a third-party system. You ain't going to get away with that with the AI Act.
You can't do what Canadian Airlines tried to do with the chatbots.
You need to pay up.
You need to pay up. The computer says no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we talked about selecting people from resumes. I mean, and this is one of your core processes. And you can imagine that if you work with recruiters, this is the supply chain, right? So as an organization, you also want to ensure that they are doing it ethically. Yeah. To you, Wouter-Bas, can you give us some nice examples of great applications AI applications at Randstad?
You gave just one, right?
That's one, but I'm very interested in maybe the very interesting ones where the ethical issues are apparent and how you address those.
So search and match is a quite obvious one, where we had a lot of conversations. Some people were like, let's use Gen AI because it's, but we were already starting with traditional machine learning, looking at vector-based search. How can we also think from the beginning about building in fairness? So, for example, we know the Amazon example. We all know the Amazon example where they actually removed all kind of attributes that could reveal names, etc. But in the end, AI was able to find out based on how the CV was written, what was a woman and what was a man. Because apparently females write their CV in a different way than male programmers. That was really, so AI saw something that nobody thought about while building that whole algorithm. And as such, we had like, okay, so you cannot just do it on the CV. Can we do it more on, hey, let's do it on the hard requirements. So look at, what do you need for a specific job? So it makes it also difficult to use it for all jobs at this moment, but we are building that model. So really, what are the different hard requirements for a job and how can you make them in vectors? Make them better also than people, because we know people have their inherent bias, and as a result, we get bias in recruiting, and that's why we train our people. But we know people make mistakes, so the data is also biased by default. So how can we get that out? How can we find it? How can we try to improve it? Mm-hmm. And it's never going to be perfect at the moment, but hopefully in the future we get somewhere. But it's going to be a long journey. Because the other side of it, if you build it right, it's actually better than a biased person. You can help also people to not take wrong decisions. And that's where we're trying to find that balance between the two and how to do that. And yeah, that's a journey, and that's a super complex one. And we see that also with some other applications. So we created a job creator. Part of the work is creating job profiles. And if you don't write a job profile right, you attract not a diverse public of candidates.
Of course.
Because the way you write it will appeal to one group more than to another group. So how can you write inclusive job profiles? And we trained our people already in the past on that. And we applied those rules and trained the model on how can we train the model to do the same for us.
And did you do this with Gen AI?
No.
I find that very interesting that you try to
Not
avoid
yet.
it.
We are looking now at can we improve the model using Gen AI, but...
No, so I like the fact that you're being careful with it, also because of the explainability.
Yeah, but you also see with the speed of AI and with the all new models, you see that there is getting a bit of, and that's I think the biggest challenge still going. People want to go faster, want to do more. They see the opportunity, and how do we make sure they understand there is a boundary there to manage?
Yes.
That's.
How about engineering boundaries? Because at Software Improvement Group, we looked at the quality of AI systems. Luc demonstrated it. Quality is relatively low. So does Randstad have any practices in place to make sure that engineers build systems that are future-proof instead of proofs of concept just?
So there's two ways of looking at it. So I think a lot of stuff we just buy.
Yeah, why not?
So we work with parties that help us supply tools. But some of the critical stuff we build ourselves. And there we have dedicated people that are trained. Interesting conversations we now have, for example, I'm a GDPR nerd. Article 22 of the GDPR, automated decision making, which is actually not allowed unless there are some rules set. So if you look at where the world is moving nowadays with all this technology, you will see a different way of human in the loop, human oversight. Where we in the past we had consultants we will get more and more like AI doing all kind of recommendations, building lists of, hey, this candidate is the best, and then that. Then you move into a world where the moment consultants are starting to rely on it, where there is maybe not even a consultant involved anymore because the candidate wants to decide in the middle of the night which job they want to apply to, and there is no consultant awake.
Right.
Those kind of things, how do you work on that? And that's where we work together with our developers from our perspective to, again, expand those guardrails, explain to them, this is how you do it. This is how to test it. So we also align on how do we test it, build in controls about data subject rights. How can people get their data out of models? And yeah, it's a continuous conversation. We have not fully yet put everything in a tight process. There is too many pockets of developers. It's still a bit like what you're saying. We're pioneering. How can we do this best?
Everybody is.
We have a certain group that is ahead of the game because they already thought about it longer, because they understand the sensitivity of the data. We have other groups that are still trying to find out what does it mean, and we are trying to coach them all, and that's why we also built that group of responsible AI officers across the globe to give this to all those different people that are doing stuff and developing. So still finding there is not a silver bullet yet.
How about for Dutch Railways, Dimitri? How do you help support development teams, and especially AI engineering teams or data science teams, with making systems that are secure and future-proof, scalable?
Yeah, so data engineering is one part, but we also have the train part, right? Mm-hmm. The OT part.
OT part, yeah.
And that's heavily protocoled. So you really need to go through many stage gates before you can actually change something or add something new to a train, specifically in the lower operating levels, because safety is paramount. And you need to recertify your train. It costs a lot of money, costs a lot of time. So for the example that I gave, where we implemented AI in the train, it took 4 years. So that's a lot of planning ahead, a lot of work that needs to be done. That's in the engineering, the training area. Same goes for our plants, where we do the refurbishing of the trains. On the IT part and on the data science part, we are helping the engineers and the teams with new threat models, for example. So we used to have, I think, 3 flavors, NIST, Stride being the most common. Now we are adding a 4th with AI attack vectors that they can look at and simulate also how an LM will respond to those threats and attack vectors. So this was a very strange. Actually, they did not embrace it at first. So the red team that usually does the pen testing said, "No, that's AI. It's not our cup of tea. We are cybersecurity."
Yeah,
but actually, it's very similar. And now that they've done it a couple of times, they are very interested and happy that they can have a new view on the world. Actually. Yeah.
Cool story. Thanks. So it's 10:02. I also want to do some closing notes, but before we do that, I want to ask each one of you to give the audience, if you want, one key takeaway for making AI a success without breaking everything. So AI acceleration. Starting with you, Suzanne.
Can I do 2 very quickly?
No.
Okay, I'll choose. I think if there's one ethical principle to take away, I would say that it should be around the need for human oversight, because if you think about all of the examples that we've talked about of where it goes wrong, it's always where we've sort of let technology go off on a silo and do its own thing without human oversight. And actually nothing good really ever came out of silo working, whether it's people or systems or anything else, and it's no different with AI. So human oversight, hybrid working is the way it can be powerful and the way you can mitigate risks.
Thank you, I agree, but it costs so much time. That's why I always hear, but yeah, there you have it. Thanks. Dimitri?
I think my biggest takeaway, it was said by the man in the back, about shifting up instead of shifting left, shifting left
right.
and shifting up. It's talking to your board about business value and also looking at the architecture and the business architecture. Because I really believe that, especially in the old, ancient railway sector, we have like process architectures where one step follows the other. And we are now going to more like real-time decision-making architecture, which is totally different.
Yeah.
So I think shifting up and looking at how to redesign your business to really enable and embrace AI is really a whole new business. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Start with the principles. Would be my advice, and don't reinvent the wheel.
Oh yeah. very
Use
good
what
one.
you already have and build on it. Yeah. I did.
Now, I need to be fair then. So,
And shift up and shift left. Just saying.
Shift down.
so WB, thank you for that. Which, brings me to Suzanne. Your second takeaway. In all
Just wanted to
fairness.
give you the opportunity.
Our own responsibility as users. You can do it, you may do it, but always think about whether you should do it.
And don't blame AI if it goes wrong. Yeah, exactly. Dimitri, maybe another one then?
No, I'm good.
I will give you the book later, guys. Thank you very much. Give them a warm round of applause.